Hello, everyone. So this week I'm very excited because I've been dying to speak to somebody in India for a long time. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm constantly talking about how India has been on my top 3 countries to go to for as long as I can remember. And I cannot believe I have not made it there yet. I have been very fortunate that some of my best friends grew up there and have been cooking for me and teaching me about their culture and their favorite places to go for years and years. I really wanted to talk to somebody on the ground, and you all know that I love talking to other women, especially women that have a tie-in with media. So I'm very fortunate, through a friend of a friend, to be sitting here today with Smitha, who's currently in Mumbai, which is obviously much better weather than is happening here in London, which is something I complain about every week. But I'm extra excited because of what you cover in media. So if you wouldn't mind just give me a little intro on you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Carrie. This is so great to be here. So my name is Smitha and I'm the Culinary Editor at Condé Nast Traveller India. I've been with Condé Nast for about 6 years now, and I work in like the digital plus print space. So we cover everything between social media to what goes up on the website to the actual magazine itself. And I've been working in the media space for about 12 years now, I think. I started with business news, and then I moved into like the lifestyle side because stocks are not as interesting as travel. So yeah, and I kind of knew that I always wanted to write for a living and just travel, obviously. And I wanted to do something that was a blend of two things. I didn't really know how to do it until I found this job, and I was like, this is
That's
like
it.
the perfect
That was
storm.
the fit.
Yeah.
Well, plus,
Exactly.
I mean, I see that because your title is your culinary editor. Is that right? Or is it right? But you cover, I see when I was looking at past articles, because I try to do some research, I saw there was kind of a crossover clearly between travel, hospitality, into culinary. And certainly in a country like India, which is just known worldwide for its splendor of culinary, items. And I'm sure for you, it could be, you could write for years and years and you'd never run out of areas of things to special cuisine, special areas. And before we started recording, it was funny because we were briefly talking about international travel versus like local travel. And a big theme this year, because everybody's been locked in, has been how far you can travel. And, I think for me, and every time I talk about India, it's like, I know that when I go there, it's going to have to be for a month plus because it's just scratching the surface. There's so much to see. So in terms of local travel, I mean, I'm sure, do you feel like have you just scratched the surface? Have you been around a lot? You clearly grew up in Mumbai, so you're in a very popular city, global city, metropolis. Yeah. But how often do you get to, I guess with your work, you are traveling around a fair bit, but do you feel like you've seen a lot, or you're nowhere near kind of covering India, just given the depth?
Nowhere near. There's just so much to see in India. So I've lived in Bombay pretty much all of my life, but my roots are in Kerala, which is in the south of India. And just in that one state, there's so much to see. And I mean, how Indians describe India to people from outside of India is that it's kind of like Europe. Each state is a different country in that sense. So there's, each state has its own food and languages, and there's so many different typographies and all of that, and all of those things tie into the food, obviously. Each state has its own religion and like a religious mix. So all of those things contribute to each of those places. And I've really just not even scratched the surface, I would say. I get to travel with work, which is great. And because the experiences that you get when you travel as a journalist are really quite unique.
Absolutely.
People always want to show you the cool things in their neighborhood or the cool things in their cities. And so that's great. So I'm very fortunate for that. But I don't think I've seen enough at all, really.
Well, it's so hard. I mean, my friend Amit, who I mentioned earlier, who, by the way, connected us, he's been one of my closest friends for years and years and years in New York, but grew up in India, in Mumbai. And, we always talk about, essentially, it's one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. And so just going back through history, through now, it's just unbelievable. There's just never enough time, I guess. But I can't wait to go and visit. And I'm glad that I ate before this because I'd probably be starving by the end of it if we're talking about food. Obviously, it's nice now that I'm in London, though, because Indian food is so popular. It's so weird just sometimes saying Indian food because, like you said, there's so many different types of culinary items depending on areas. So that seems like kind of a wide brush to be putting it under. But it's obviously it's a big cuisine here, and so it's on every block. There's another phenomenal restaurant I keep on discovering. So in terms of travel, then. I guess because it probably ties in with local, but what was the first trip you remember taking as a kid and then as an adult?
As a kid, so I was born in Bahrain. Actually, my siblings were born in Bahrain. My parents were there in the Gulf for a while when we were kids. And we traveled every now and then. Obviously, we came back to India to see our grandparents and our relatives and all of that. But I think the trip that was the most distinct to me in my memory would be the trip that we made back from Bahrain when we were moving back to India. So, my parents had sort of prepped us for this journey and prepped us for the fact that we were moving, and, that we were moving away from friends and, basically everything that we knew. And we were moving back to India. So, by the time that we actually had to get on the plane, we were all pretty excited. Because, you're a gullible kid, you just listen to what your parents say. So they were like, it's going to be so great, and you're going to be like closer to all your cousins, and, India has much better weather, and, all of this stuff. They totally sold us on India. And
that's good prep
funny
work.
thing is that, I remember it happening for a while, like there were months of this, we're moving, and it's going to be so exciting, and all of this happening. And it was really cool actually because when we checked in, I remember at the airport, the woman at the counter upgraded two of us. She said I can upgrade two people into business class. So I figure out who wants to travel and who can do it, and then I can do that. And obviously my parents couldn't, the two of them couldn't take the tickets and leave the three of us in coach. So it had to be one parent and one kid. And then I won the lucky draw, me and my dad.
Oh, that's a great first trip.
Yeah. And I was 7 and it was the first time I flew in business class. And it was just cool because I was the only kid in business class that day. So I got all the extra attention, really, really sweet stewardesses who came up to me and gave me all of their free stuff on the flight.
Wow, that is a great start. That is a great start.
Yeah, I was like, this is great. I could really get used to this.
I'm going to travel like this all the time.
Exciting. Yeah, exactly. And my siblings kept coming, and my brother and my sister, both of whom are older than me, kept coming to business class just to look at what was happening. And they were just so jealous, and they were like, "This is so
that's
great.
Such a win!" So wait, you were the youngest, and you were in business class. Okay, that was a big win.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something you can hold over your siblings for a long time.
Which I did all the time, and I think they sort of still hold it against me.
Well, then your parents really sold it right. They said it was going to be great and exciting, and that was your first entry.
This is amazing. Yeah. So that I think really set up travel, big kind of long distance travel for me in that sense, because it was just so exciting and it was such a great experience, and I had a window seat, so obviously I was looking at all the lights when we landed, and it just seemed really really special and really magical.
And was that your first time at all back to India? Was when you moved there?
No.
Oh, you had
that was
gone
when
before.
we moved back.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would go during the summer when we had breaks from school. We'd go to visit our grandparents because they were in India. But I don't remember any of those flights, but this one flight, obviously.
Of course, you got to remember the best one.
Very, very clearly. Yeah.
Well, that's a great start. Probably a sharp decline as you're having to pay for your own travel when you get older. That's what I always tell myself. So do you remember what was the first trip you took as an adult, on your own?
The first trip as an adult was completely on my own. Long distance travel was right after college. When I graduated, I went to Paris. So I told my parents that I just want to travel for a bit, and I had a little bit of money saved up. And my sister was working in Paris at the time, and I was like, look, I'm just going to stay with her. So that'll be my base, and then I'll do my own thing. And they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, go for it. So I was, 18, 17?
That's a great first trip.
Yeah, so I flew by myself. I was obviously petrified. But yeah, it was just cool. Like, I flew by myself, and my sister was obviously there, so it was nice because I had that kind of security of being with her in that sense. But she'd go to work, so I had just days of exploring Paris by myself.
That's a fantastic. I think it's both it's terrifying but also exhilarating. It's why I always tell people it's like travel is the best education. And when you're that age and you're like half cocky and confident when you're home, but like you go out and you're like, oh no, I actually have to figure this out. That's a great trip. Exactly. Those are both really nice memories.
And I mean, Paris is free. I mean, a lot of the museums and stuff are free when you're a student. And I had all of my student IDs, so I just got into like all of these cool places. I didn't have to pay anything, which is great.
But that's a really good point, and I wish more people knew that. I did a whole backpacking trip when I was 19, so I found out later. But I mean, the fact that if you're a student, you can get into so many places. Yeah, I mean, even locally, you should really be taking advantage of that because later it won't be as easy. And there's so many programs and even workshops at some of the museums and stuff that are open to students, which is really, I mean, people should be doing that as much as possible. If I could go back in time, that's what I would have been doing more of for sure.
Absolutely. Like, it was pretty exhilarating, like you said. So I remember this one time where I was trying to figure out, I was near the Champs-Elysees, and I was trying to figure out where to eat for lunch. And I didn't want to spend too much money because obviously you're on a budget and all of that, but I still wanted to go to like a nice place. And I was just hanging outside this cafe, and there were some workers who were, I think, digging up the road or something. And all of them, this is what happens when you're like a young Indian girl, like with black hair, traveling through Europe. People are always like, oh, are you from India? And then they'll sing some Bollywood song to you.
Oh, no.
It's hilarious. So these like guys on the street who were like construction workers suddenly burst into song. Like, they were like, hey, are you from India? And suddenly they burst into like this old Bollywood song, and I was so taken aback. And I was just like, am I being catcalled? Is like, how should I
what is this? Is this like, is this a live street musical?
Sing?
What is happening?
Yeah, like, should I sing back? Like, what is going on? And I was just kind of like, okay, that's great. I'm like, put my thumbs up, and I was like, thank you. And I walked away.
That's so funny.
It was so weird.
That's so random. I mean, I'm sure most people know, but Bollywood is just so massive that the reach is just everywhere. Like, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. People always talk about Hollywood, but Bollywood, the output of film and media is just so enormous that it's impossible for you to live somewhere and not have seen something, right?
Something, exactly.
And I don't know.
It's so weird because whenever I travel, people are always like, oh, you're from India, I love Amitabh Bachchan, or, all of these big stars and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, like, I had no idea that Bollywood had such a big impact, such a big global impact. But yeah, clearly it does. And that was quite something, because it felt like I had a little bit of home right next to me. Because people somehow always just burst into song. It's so weird.
It's like your own version of La La Land. That's like kind of exciting. People going into dance and song. Unfortunately, me being Canadian is not something I can imagine anybody singing except for like hockey anthems. So I will take your version over mine. I do think it's interesting though, seeing a lot of crossover too, because I used to see that with actors and Europe, certainly, that would like appear in some Hollywood films and stuff, and people were like, oh, I like that actor or actress, and you're like, no, I don't think you understand how big they are back in France or back in Germany or wherever. And certainly with Bollywood stars, I don't think people have any concept over, like, sure, there's crossover film, but if you go back and see how their star level is in front of like 1 billion people, essentially, in the country, is unbelievable. It's a whole other level of stardom, right? I don't think it can be measured.
It's crazy. crazy.
I'm so sorry. Don't mind me as I'm coughing here today.
No, not at all.
Now I think this is actually kind of funny, speaking in the Bollywood and all this stuff. But I was going to say, was there a movie or a book that inspired you to explore the most? And I find it interesting because in North America, you always hear the trope about like eat, pray, love, and I'm going to go to like India and be in an ashram for a year. And you're like, well, do you know, have you learned about India? You know, and they just kind of associate it with this one slice. I'm like, wow, you need to be reading a whole other book. But I just trying to think, what was the other big book that came up? Shantaram. That's always another book that seems to come up a lot.
Yeah,
but for you personally, was there a movie or book that you remember watching that just made you either want to travel or explore?
There was definitely, there was Ian Wright on The Lonely Planet. He did a bunch of travel shows and I used to watch those growing up on TV. And it was always so cool and so exciting because he was traveling around and like meeting Samantha Brown, all of these people. They travel around and meet cool people, and I just be like, wow, you can do that. Like that's the job that you can do. And like, I want to do that. Like, that's so cool. Like, how do I do that? And like, for the longest time, obviously as a kid, I had no idea how to do that and like how what that entire process would be like. But I just very clearly remember watching all of those shows and just being so fascinated by, being able to blend your love for travel with what you do every day. So that for sure. What else?
It's funny, Samantha Brown's come up before because she's such an OG too. Like we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but there's just not enough women in the media space when it comes to travel. Like there's a billion shows with men hosting, but I mean, she's been on the forefront of hosting those travel shows for a very long time.
Forever,
still is. I think her current one's on PBS, I think, but she's unbelievable. What a long career doing what she does. So it's really commendable. And the fact that like, look what a far reach. Like I grew up watching her, you grew up watching her, and looking at her as a model of like, that's a possibility. I think that's a huge impact.
Yeah. And it's amazing because, she wasn't like this ultra glamorous, like, always super sexy styled version of, like the TV anchors that we'd see growing up. She was just like a regular person wearing like khakis and cargos and like a travel jacket or whatever and roaming around. So I was like, okay, that's great because you're also showing women that you don't always have to look a certain way or like, like perform to an audience. You just can just like be yourself and be
you just need room to connect with people. And I don't know if it's gotten there, but so Padma Lakshmi's had a huge career in the U.S., certainly around culinary stuff and hosting shows. But she has a show called Taste the Nation that came on Hulu last year, and they're shooting the second season right now somehow. And I find it really interesting. Like I like seeing her, and she's like this stunning supermodel looking, but she's very like low key and has this very like calm voice and is just very matter of fact and straight to the point because she's a New Yorker. So she's watching her kind of go around places is really she's amazing too. And I keep thinking how I would love to see more of that on an international level. Like I think what she's doing is fantastic because it's exploring different cultures, impacting like the food in the U.S. because it is a accumulation of a whole bunch of foods. But it would be wonderful to see more of them doing like international travel bits too. I would love to see it. Maybe in the future.
Hopefully. David Chang came with, I think, the second season of Ugly Delicious. He came to India for a bit. Or that was one episode or something. So that was actually really interesting to see, especially because he met Floyd Cardos, who used to run the restaurant, the Bombay Canteen, and a bunch of others in Bombay. And of course, in New York, he used to work at Tabla, and he had the Bombay Bread Bar, I think, or Pav Wala, one of those or both of them. I'm not sure, but he, that episode came out soon after he passed away. He was one of the first people first like big food personalities to succumb to COVID. And that episode came out like 2 weeks later after he passed. So that was actually really special because you could obviously see his love for food, and he was taking David Chang around like to all of these cool places. So and that was actually really nice. And I hope that I also really like High on the Hog. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
No.
It's on Netflix here, but it's based on the book by, I'm forgetting whom. But it's also great. I mean, it's an exploration of of African food, and like how obviously all of the traditions from Africa and how they moved to the US.
Oh yeah. There's been specialized episodes in places like Georgia and South Carolina, especially about just like even from crops, things that were planted there that have really changed the food for the better. But really incredible lineage and history of culinary items. I was just thinking too with chefs when they take shows, especially North American chefs, when they go to India, it must be so intimidating for them because I think when you're talking about certain cultures, and I felt the same even when I was in like Thailand or these places in Vietnam, you have so many people that specialize in like one or two things, right? And their expertise on that is so sky high that it's so hard for anybody just to come in and think that they can like duplicate. It's impossible. So it must be kind of fascinating for them because it's like you're getting a whole new class. Doesn't matter how big of a chef you are, you're coming in, you're learning from these experts in all these areas. Which is incredible. So it's funny. So speaking of like then the Bollywood stuff, is there a particular album you associate with a special place or trip? And I always bring this up because the first trips, like you were saying, you went to Paris, right? And one of my first trips was like backpacking around, and those were the years of like Alanis Morissette and stuff. So those albums will be forever stuck in my head. So sometimes people make those associations.
No, absolutely, all the time. Like sometimes now when I hear songs, by the Goo Goo Dolls and by the Foo Fighters, I always think of college because that's the kind of music that I was listening to then. To associate with a specific place, I think it would have to be Savage Garden. So I was, how old was I? I was like 13. When we had this, so every summer we'd go to Kerala to like see to meet our relatives and our cousins and our extended family. And this one time, my parents had this idea to do a sort of family reunion. And so we went and visited people that we wouldn't normally see on a regular trip to Kerala. Like we saw like uncles and aunts and kind of extended family. But that was really cool because we saw parts of Kerala that we wouldn't see normally, and I met some cousins and hung out with them in a way that you wouldn't normally hang out, or you wouldn't normally like hang with cousins because a lot of times it's very like surface, like hi, how are you, how's it going, and you have a meal and then that's it. But because we were there and we were spending so much time with each other, we found this little patch. So okay, let me explain. So this was on a rubber plantation where all of us were staying. It was my uncle's. So Kerala is full of rubber and coconut plantation. That's what grows there. So he had a rubber plantation and his house. So we were staying at the house, but through the day we just roam around this rubber plantation and like hang out and like do our own thing. And I had a cousin who could play the guitar, and I used to sing, and a bunch of us used to sing. Back then, so we found this spot on the plantation that overlooked a bunch of paddy fields, and this album had just come out. I think it was called Affirmation. I think I
remember that album. Yeah.
It had Crash and Burn, and it had Animal Song, and all of these like classic Savage Garden songs. But basically, we just like sang all of those songs at that space. And it was really beautiful because it was just like 4 or 5 of us and like my cousin playing the guitar, and it overlooked this beautiful paddy field. So whenever I hear any of those songs from that album, I'm instantly transported.
I mean, hold on here. 3 for 3 unbelievable experiences. A first-class flight to India. You've got like people singing Bollywood songs to you on the street, and now you're like singing in some gorgeous open field like with a group of your cousins. This is not how my childhood went. It's like, I mean, listen, sorry, Mom, if you're listening. I had a great childhood, but that sounds like unbelievable. What?
Yeah. I mean, I realize now that it sounds pretty amazing. I think I had a pretty regular childhood, but
it's a nostalgia, right? It's a nostalgia, and that's why I always ask about like movies or songs, because they're always those things that you, as soon as you hear something, you're triggered and you go back into that moment. And I think they're usually very specific to a place. I mean, smells, we can go into that too for culinary reasons. Like it will take you right back to a moment.
Absolutely.
And so it's so powerful that stuff follows you around for your whole life. So was there, you were saying your influence, like you remember watching people on shows and stuff. Was there a historical woman who comes to mind who is an inspiration to you to travel or to see things or to explore?
Historical, not so much, but Nigella for sure. Nigella is just amazing.
She is.
Anything she does, she's just so unapologetically, herself. And I think, just watching her shows and, all of that was just so exciting to see this woman who just didn't give, too much about what people think about her, and she's just doing her own thing. So definitely Nigella, obviously Anthony Bourdain for, all of those shows, Parts Unknown, No Reservations, all of those are just amazing shows to watch. It's just so exciting.
I know. There's so many people. I mean, I know it's a hard question because I feel like sometimes people pop in your head too. You have a memory and be like, oh yeah, I remember that person, and I didn't realize that was something I carried with me. Certainly Bourdain has come through these episodes. Nigella is a great example. She's phenomenal. And I think it's funny, it's the second time that you've mentioned this, and I always say this too about people being themselves and real, because that's the only way people are connecting with people, especially as they're traveling the world. Nobody's interested in like some false pretense that you're going to be real. They're going to connect with that. And so if you're working in travel or certainly with journalism, you got to come as yourself and have those conversations because that's how you get the good stuff.
So that's the real luxury in travel, just being able to connect.
Just being able to connect.
Or just having an experience that is so incredibly local and rooted in that place that, you can't replicate at all anywhere else.
No, you can't. And that's, one of my hopes is the world opens up more and more is that we see, I want to see less Instagrams of people doing the same pose at the same places. And I want people or staying in the shelter of one hotel or something. I mean, the whole point is if you're traveling somewhere, you dip into that culture and you learn from it, right? And you leave better than when you arrived. And so as cliche as that sounds, it's really not, because you're there to see new things, a new way of life, talk to other people that might be very similar to you. But it is so key to have those experiences, or really what's the point? I just don't understand. I don't get it.
It's just too sanitized. There's no point.
Yeah. So
having that kind of an experience.
100%. Well, I guess kind of on that note then, like, what foreign cultural experience, so foreign outside of India, made the largest impact on you? And I realize that's a loaded question. It could just be one.
Outside of India.
It's kind of interesting where you are too, because you have access to so many very different countries in your sphere.
I'm in a very, very privileged position because I get to travel so much with work and meet really, really cool people. So that's always really exciting. But can I give you like a non-foreign, like an Indian?
Yes, let's hear it.
Travel experience or cultural experience. So I can't really think of a foreign experience right now. But when I was traveling to Ladakh, which is right at the top of India, it shares a border with China. And when I was traveling there some years ago on assignment for Condé Nast Traveller, I was interviewing a bunch of different people in the region, and it just so happened that the Dalai Lama was in town.
Oh my gosh!
During that time. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And we have to try and meet him. Obviously, I'm here with a photographer on assignment for a travel magazine. I have to meet him. And like, this is literally the only way I can meet him, right? Like just throw the big name, the big media name and try and
see what happens.
Kind of meeting. Yeah. So I asked this person who told me that, he's in town and you should try and meet him. And I was like, please, can you figure out a contact? And then he figured out someone, and then we went to meet that guy, and that guy was like, yeah, sure, we can try and figure this out. So he invited us to this huge lunch that was being thrown in honor of him. And of course, the Dalai Lama gave this big talk, and right after that, we were given 10 minutes to meet him, which was just incredible. Like, it was, I'm
what?
not a super
this is just piling to your book that you're going to write. What the heck? This is just escalating steadily during this conversation. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Like I'm not a super religious, or even like, I mean, spirituality is very personal to me. So it's not like I really follow anyone or anything. But when I met him, there was just like this amazing energy, and it was just like so positive, and it was like really like standing in a ray of sunshine.
Unbelievable.
And I know that sounds crazy. And
no, I
stupidly
totally
cliche,
get it. People's like the energy around them, especially somebody who's thinking and feeling and whole being is about like positive momentum and in space and the universe, or whatever you want to say. It's unbelievable.
It was, that was really, really special. Obviously I was shaking like about 10 minutes after we met him. Like I was just like, oh my God, like, did that actually
what just happened?
And we were in Ladakh, which has like really bad connectivity. So I couldn't like call anyone or tell them or anything. And I didn't want to tell people until it actually happened. Like I was talking to my husband, and I was like, I have this big meeting. I don't know if it's going to happen, and I don't want to say because I don't want to jinx it. And then when it actually happened, we were in the middle of nowhere, and I couldn't call anyone. So it was just me and my photographer who were like jumping around, and we were like, holy shit, like what just happened?
You're having like a mini celebration. You have to. If you tried to contain all that, you would have it would have been too much. Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. I mean, I think what's even better about that is that it was spontaneous, that it was something that was just in the moment when you were there, and found your way into a connection.
He's normally in Dharamshala. I mean, most of the time during the year, at least pre-COVID, he's always traveling. So it's really hard to actually pin him down and meet him. So the fact that all of these things just aligned pretty easily, like we didn't have to try too hard to make it happen. It was amazing. It just felt like the stars just aligned for it to happen. It was crazy.
Unbelievable. Well, listen, I told you, start writing these chapters down. You got to write a book about your culinary experiences sometime, which I'm almost afraid to ask you this next question because it's going to keep on escalating, and I'm just going to sit here with positive envy, envy of these experiences. I don't want to sound jealous. These are just unbelievable. So this really pertains to you, specializing in culinary topics. But then, and this is going to be hard again because it's hard to say the best. It could be one great one. But what was the greatest or one of the greatest culinary experiences you've had? It could be in India or somewhere else.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm very, very fortunate to be in a job where, I get to meet these amazing chefs, who whether I'm traveling or, whether people come down. I've met, touch wood, some of the biggest names in the space, and that's always very, very humbling. But I think the greatest, or at least the most exciting experience that comes to mind would be when I went to Vietnam with my husband in 2019, October. Vietnam is just, all of the food and the produce coming out of Vietnam is so amazing.
Some of my favorite.
Food
I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. The food is a reflection, much like India, of everyone who came to the country. So in India, of course, we had the Mughal rulers, we had the Dutch, we had the Portuguese, of course, the British. In Vietnam, of course, there was the French, the Japanese, and the Americans. And all of those things had a way, they're all reflected in the food. And it's just fascinating to see that. So when we went to Saigon, Ho Chi Minh, and we went to Hanoi, and then a bunch of other places. And I always like to do these street food tours and that kind of thing, because that's just a way to get an experience and get a sense of the place, as opposed to going to the fanciest places around, which we try and do as well.
Yeah.
But I like to taste the street food and figure that scene out as well. So we had signed up for the street food tour. And we had this amazing local guide who was taking us through to all of these places. And she showed us the Ban Cheo, which is basically, it's different in the north and south of Vietnam. In the north, I think it's kind of like a pancake, like of rice flour that's filled with lots of fresh produce. And crab and fish and then you roll it up and you dip it in fish sauce and eat it. But in the South, instead of that rice batter sort of pancake thing, instead of the crepe, it's actually all different leaves. So so you layer like some 6-7 kinds of leaves, and then you roll it up, dip it in fish sauce, and eat it. And so before we did all of this local guide made me taste each leaf before I rolled it up, and that was just so amazing and so exciting because each of those leaves had a different flavor. So there was like citrus and wasabi and papaya leaf, and all of these like crazy leaves and herbs that I never like tasted individually. India has a lot of spices and herbs as well, but these were just all so different. And then like she got me to layer one on top of the other, and then we put a little bit of I think it was shrimp and fish into it, and then rolled it up with veggies, and dipped it in fish sauce and ate it, and it was just so good. I think my mouth is watering just talking about it.
I mean, Vietnamese food is some of my favorite. We grew up with a family friend who's from Vietnam, and she would make me, my friend's mother would make me food all the time. And I just, the freshness, certainly there specifically, but just I love all the different food. I could eat it all the time. It's just so good. Oh my God. I need to find some Vietnamese.
It really blew my mind.
Here, I haven't explored enough. Yeah, no, I need a short list of some really good places here. Hopefully, you'll have an assignment. Come to London, and I'll be like your assistant or something. We'll roam around. That's a great experience, though. It is really great. Was there a destination that you traveled to that pleasantly surprised you or thrilled you the most?
It would have to be South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
So I traveled, before I worked at Condé Nast Traveller, I used to work in video. So I worked with NDTV, which is a big, TV network here, and shoot like a bunch of like travel and fashion stuff for them. So we traveled to South Africa, and we got to like shoot in a lot of the national parks. So we shot at Kruger, we shot at a bunch of different places, and that typography and landscape is just so stunning. I mean, you see, obviously you see the people and you see the photographs and all of that, but when you actually experience, driving through this game reserve in the night, and like the stars are just, it's literally like a blanket of stars, and there's these beautiful, beautiful colors in the sky. It was just, that to me was just so, so beautiful and stunning. So,
that's a special one. That's a good trip too. Yeah. You have gone to a lot of places. Again, I think it's. I'm always really envious for friends of mine that live certainly in Asia, Central Asia, and Europe, just because there's so many options, quick flights. I'm obviously born and raised in North America, both Canada and the U.S. So when growing up, we would do a lot of local travel or road trips or that kind of thing. But the fact that you can just kind of cross into these other places, I mean, certainly I know South Africa is quite a haul, but the fact is that there's still a lot of things in the vicinity which are really exciting. And being able, especially for India, going either to more Asian countries or flip side to Europe or flip side to like Middle East or anywhere else is so nice to have all those options. Is pretty special. Yeah. So
absolutely. It's just like really nicely geographically located. I just wish that like visa processes were easier, because that's always a pain in the ass.
That's what my friends say. I've heard that a lot, and I feel like, it's funny. Obviously, I have 2 passports, being American and Canadian, but everybody I know is always like, hang on to your Canadian passport forever. The one thing that will be a safe bet your whole life. Keep it.
For sure.
I'm like, there's going to be countries that will be more prone to being like, okay, coming in, and, versus like, not so fast. Yeah. So then in terms of local experiences again, I mean, honestly, I could have a podcast just talking about India for like 5 hours. There's so much to talk about, but as far as, are there any favorites in like where you are currently or where you grew up in terms of local experiences? Because we talk a lot, when I talk about travel, I know that not everybody's going to be lucky enough to be able to get on a plane or to go certain places, but I always highly recommend, like in your hometown or the next town over, there's always some incredible experience waiting for you. It could be a museum, it could be some kind of culinary experience. It could be something like that. But do you have, I mean, obviously you're one of the greatest metropolises in the world, so spoiled for choice, but a few favorites maybe that come to mind?
So this is actually really interesting because it was my birthday in January, and normally around that time I try and travel just to like get out and like reduce all of this hoopla and expectation around the birthday and like what should you do and who should you invite, all of these things. So I just like to get out and like not deal with any of that. But this time, obviously, we couldn't travel. So I was trying to think of a way to meet my friends somewhere, outdoors, so where everyone was kind of comfortable hanging out. And in Bombay, there aren't too many outdoor spaces that are not restaurants and bars where you can just hang out. So I was trying to figure that out, but there's this really cool woman called Alisha Sadikot. And she does a lot of heritage walks around Bombay. So I got her to come and like do a walk for me and a bunch of my friends.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
It just like, just really lined up well. And it was fun because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to like history and culture and that kind of stuff.
Listen, me too. One of these days, that's like all I talk about. So this is, we'll have that crossover conversation on a different day. But I am 100% with you. And it's funny just because I love heritage walks and I do it a lot of times. I travel a lot by myself. And it's one of the first things I do to kind of like, even though I do pre-research, it's one way to get the lay of the land. And especially in somewhere you grew up. But it's such a big city with such a huge history. I mean, it's so phenomenal to walk with somebody who's equally passionate about where they live and things that she's interested in. So I think that's an amazing idea.
So that was really fun. And she does this in different parts of the city. So obviously I picked an area that everyone was comfortable traveling to. And it was also like I wanted to like finish it up with like a picnic or something because no one wanted to go eat at a restaurant.
Right.
So there's actually a park that side of town which is in South Bombay called Horniman Gardens. So and it's one of the few parks in Bombay where you can actually go and eat with food. So a lot of parks are open for, if you want to walk around and jog and that kind of stuff, but they don't let you take food in.
Oh, okay.
So this one actually has benches and you can go and like lay out your stuff. So we carried a bunch of food, and then set a little picnic. And the weather's good in January. So right after this like crazy walk, we did a little picnic in the middle of this park. And that was really nice. Like, I've lived in the city for so long and I've never done that.
Right, seeing something new.
I would have like looked for something like that, if we didn't have all of these restrictions. It sort of forced me to figure out this plan.
Yeah.
So that was actually really nice. Just
and now you probably want to do more
from a different way. Absolutely, because she was like, if you're interested in history, you should do this and this and this and this. And I was like, oh my God, sign me up.
Yeah, because it becomes a rabbit hole. And then all of a sudden you're obsessed.
Exactly.
I do the same thing. I mean, any day I can, especially in any city, but since I've moved to London, it's like I'm in a different museum. It could be the most obscure history museum. I will still stop in it just because... why not? So the walking tours, though, for your birthday especially, I love that idea. I'm going to sign people up for my next birthday in February, but it'll be too rainy here, so I'll have to do a plan B.
Oh, yeah.
But I love that. Meanwhile, you could do your own culinary tour and say that people can rub off some good luck from you on travel stuff. Feel like anything could happen.
For sure.
Here's my story. I could see it now.
That's a good idea.
It's funny. I feel like I'm going to skip this question because I was going to be like, what's the funniest or wildest experience that you can talk of since with you being on the road? But I feel like you've already peppered a few of those in. So unless there's something that really springs to mind, but I think we're okay there. Something I do. It's okay if you don't want to, but it's always funny to me if somebody has something else.
Sure. Yeah, I actually have a funny story from the time that we traveled to South Africa. I was traveling with like a camera crew. And we were going to shoot and all of that. And it was kind of like a super hectic time at work. So I had just come back from Goa, from another like 20-day shoot. And I had like 2 days in between before I flew to South Africa for like this 10, 12-day shoot. So obviously right before a shoot, things are super hectic because you're trying to like, make sure you have everything in line and, you're fully prepped and all of that. So anyway, I was really exhausted by the time I got to the airport. It's a different process if you're traveling with professional shooting equipment. You have to go to go through customs and all of that. So the camera crew went through customs, and I was like, I'll see you after that. We got on the flight. The doors were shutting, and my camera guy was just, accounting for all of the equipment. And he came up to me, and there were two camera guys and me. And he came up to me, and he was like, "You have one camera, right?" And I was like, "No, why would I have the camera? You're the camera guy. Like, the camera's with the two of you, right?" And he was like, "No, I thought you had one camera because we have one camera between the two of us." And I was like, and literally, like, suddenly this whole thing happened, like, in front of my eyes in slow motion, where I saw, the cabin crew shutting the door for the flight. And once they shut it, they're not going to open it.
No.
And she shut it, and I was like, holy crap. Like,
oh, no.
We're flying to South Africa for this shoot. And we have one camera, and we're one camera down. And the thing about shooting in South Africa is you need all of these permissions, and the permissions and the papers and stuff were in the camera bag that was
missing.
Left behind.
Oh my God!
So
I used to be a producer, so you're giving me anxiety just hearing this.
It was. And like, oh my God, it was so stressful, and it was like 3 a.m. So I couldn't like call my boss and be like, "Hey, what just happened?" And obviously there was no like WhatsApp, and I had just gotten a BlackBerry then, so I like sent out all of the emails that I could and like marked like everyone that I could, and I was like, "Guys, I don't know how this has happened, but we're down one camera. It's obviously still in Bombay Airport, still somewhere around, but I have no way to figure this out." So, and I'm taking off now and all of that. Like, obviously, so we delayed the flight by an hour because we were trying to like negotiate with the cabin crew to open the door and get someone to check at Bombay Airport. And they were just like, "No way, please sit down. Like, stop wasting our time."
Oh, no.
So we flew 8 hours from Bombay to Johannesburg. And then when we got to Johannesburg, the people there were like, "You can't take the extra camera you have with you, the one camera you have with you, because your permissions are in the other bag."
Oh, God.
So we had to leave that camera. Luckily, there was a crew that was flying like 2 days later from Delhi. So they had to reroute their journey. So they flew from Delhi to Bombay. Thankfully, they found the camera at the airport. They picked up the camera from there and then flew to Johannesburg. But, that was one of the most stressful shoots
a
ever.
Nightmare. And you're right about the permissions, because I've shot before in China, and just like the amount of paperwork and getting equipment through was a whole ordeal. Oh my God. Well, you're so lucky that other camera even made it.
Thank God. I mean, I would have lost my job for sure. Be
like, "I'm sorry, I don't know what happened." Oh no.
Yeah. So, I mean, after we came back, obviously we had to do like a full debrief with my boss and all of those things. But she was actually just like, "You guys should have been more careful. But obviously, it's you're back. We have the footage we need. So let's just agree that this is
move
never
on
gonna happen again."
Yeah, 100%. You're like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll forget about that." Oh God. Well, then from a stressful situation to a happier one, because I always think this is like an interesting question, but where were the happiest people you've ever met or been among? Like, who do you think kind of as a culture or society just kind of got it right?
I would have to say maybe Ladakh. So again, in Ladakh is like this little tiny state in the north, absolute north of India. And because they, are so it's actually one of the few places on the planet that has been continuously inhabited. That's where the Silk Route happened, but that's where the Silk Route passed through. So it has a lot of influences from China. Obviously the Dalai Lama keeps going, so Buddhism is very big there. And what I found really interesting is that the gender roles are kind of reversed. So India is generally a patriarchal society, where women always take the back seat, in any sort of situation, just culturally or traditionally. But in Ladakh, the roles are reversed. So, the women run the businesses, the women run the houses, they run everything. The men kind of get drunk and do,
they're there.
pretty useless characters. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, but the women run everything. And I had
well,
the
no
chance
wonder
to
it's
meet,
like a happier place.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes
It's
sense.
so much more sorted out. Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah, for sure.
It's just amazing, and they have, it's so culturally rich, Ladakh, and, but they're not, people who are in your face about the history and the culture that they have and what they can bring to the world. It's sort of this quiet pride that they have, and they just want to show you the best of the region. So they're all really sweet, really hospitable. And yeah, it just, left me with this really amazing, positive experience. So
it's interesting. I mean, I only know very little about it, but what I'll do is I always put in the show notes, like links for people to read more, but I'm going to go read more about it after our chat.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'll put some links for sure, but I think that's so interesting. Yeah. I've heard kind of a spectrum of answers on this podcast. From Bali's come up a few times. Nepal came up. And so I feel like there's a similar theme going in here. So I definitely understand.
For sure.
And kind of on that note, so if, and this is always hard because for someone like me, I could give 10 answers, and some people can't give answers, and some people just have one. But if you could live in another country tomorrow, like somebody's like, you got to go, everything's fine. Your husband's on board, everybody's on board. You got to go here, live here for a year. Where would you, a different country, where would you go?
Wow, that's really hard.
I
want to go and experience something that would be very different from what I'm used to. So maybe somewhere in Scandinavia, maybe Copenhagen, maybe Japan even. I've always wanted to go. I've never gone. But yeah, I'd love to go to Japan, to Scandinavia. New York has always been a place where, I've gone to, and it always seems like home. It just seems so familiar.
Yeah.
Maybe because Mumbai is just so much like it, or, at least people say that. But yeah, I'd love to live in New York at some point. But yeah, in terms of maybe just for a year, maybe somewhere in Scandinavia.
Well, you can split it. See, in a fantasy world, you can go live in all these places for like 3 months apiece. But I get it. I mean, sometimes if you have that opportunity to be somewhere completely different is like really interesting. I think it would be life changing. Obviously, because you've traveled so much, do you have like any kind of routine or certain priorities when you travel to a new place? Like, is there things that you're always like, I'm going to do these 3 things somewhere, or this is how I prepare, just things that you always do when you travel?
When I travel, I definitely, like, as soon as I reach the place, I do a kind of like recce walk around the neighborhood just to get a sense of like what's around, where are the supermarkets. I absolutely love going to local supermarkets. I think it's such a cool way to get an insight on a culture.
Agreed.
Just looking at like the stuff that's on the shelves, but also kind of like looking into like what people are buying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I always like I love
stuff.
seeing people's like different flavored potato chips in different countries, because there's always like a huge swing there, and it's just about their junk food go-to. It's so interesting to me.
It's so interesting, and all of like the different sauces and what they're flavored with. I love like checking out the instant noodles. And similarly, just like the potato chips, like, what are the different crazy flavor combinations. So that's always super fun for me. This is actually something that I read in an article by Samantha Brown, where she said that she likes to go to the same place for coffee every day when she's traveling, like, in her neighborhood. Because that gives you like a sense of being a local, and like, by the time you go there on your 4th day or your 5th day, whatever, like people are kind of, they're kind of used to seeing your face at a certain time in the day. So it's nice because they start treating you like one of them. And ever since I read that, I try to do that whenever I'm traveling, and I found that actually really works. So yeah, that's something that I like to do as well. Like, just
I like that a lot.
I've
never thought of it, but I think that's really nice, because then you have kind of an anchor too, like in being somewhere different. Oh, that's really a good idea. Yeah. Good on you, Samantha Brown. Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah. For sure.
So this is always a big one too. Then it's what greatest lessons from traveling or through shared cultural experiences that you now apply to your life. Like, is there something you've taken away from all this travel and exploration?
It's tough to say this without making it sound cliche or generic, but I think travel just teaches you to be open to everything. Like something may seem weird or foreign or just very, very different as compared to what you're normally used to. But travel has a way of offering things up to you in your life when you least expect it.
Absolutely.
And just generally, like, going with the flow is something that I've learned from traveling, and I try and apply that to my life. When I try to like micromanage like too many things in my life, and I'm like, okay, this is not going the way I want it to, and this is not happening on time. And then I'm just like, let's just see what happens. And
100%,
once you chill out and go with the flow,
But that's such a good lesson because I think that's just it. Everybody's under the illusion that they can control things, which we know is a farce. And so we're like trying to force so many things and then probably missing out on loads when we do that. So the minute you take a step back, it makes a huge difference. In travel, you kind of always have to be in the moment. You can only prep so much, and then you have to be there in the moment, on your feet, taking things in. And I think that does a lot on so many different levels. And I think it probably does a lot for mental health, honestly, because we're all in each other's heads, like in our normal day-to-day so much. You step out of it and you're like, oh, this is kind of ridiculous. I should probably be a little bit more open to other things. I don't know who I am to think that I can control everything around me. It's ridiculous, but we all do it.
And I mean, some of my most exciting travel experiences have come from, not going as per like the like bucket list that you have down. And just sort of being like, what, let's go to that tiny cafe, or that museum looks interesting, or like these tiny obscure places that just offer up so much more.
100%.
Which is always fascinating.
Well, and this is kind of tied to the same, or leading into the next question, but what would you tell your younger self about traveling or learning from others around the world, especially other women?
I think it would be to just like, just go with the flow. Similarly, like, not be so caught up about what people are going to say, what people are going to do, what other people are going to think about you. Like, just do what you want.
100%.
And do what makes you happy in that moment, as compared to maybe, like, thinking about like, I have to do this because it's going to tie into something 5 years from now or whatever. Like, just do what makes you happy in that moment. And it's kind of like,
most of us will probably forget what we did 5 years ago. I mean, honestly, I think, again, we care too much about like the most random things, where it's like, in perspective, it's like, oh, okay. So, it's
especially when you're in college, it's all like, I should do this major just because, it's going to lead into this job, and, all of these dumb things. But
no, and it's so interesting because I love the one thing, because you and I both work in media fields, is like, because I'm a storyteller, you're a storyteller. I love hearing other people's stories. We kind of live in a time where everybody's sharing their stories, sometimes to good and bad, feedback. But I think that the more we hear from people, especially people like in different age groups. So I see a lot of groups, like older women now that are like, I'm an older woman now. I always feel like, wait a second, what happened? Yesterday I blinked, and yesterday I was 20, and it's like 20 something years. But like time, like that age group box is nothing. It's not real. It doesn't matter. You can change things at any moment. You can see all kinds of examples, and again, specifically of women doing different things all around the world that have had like 5 different careers, or like done what, or lived in different, whatever they want to do. And I think it's really important that we see more and more and more of that, which is part of the reason why I want to keep on talking more and more and more to different women, especially this year. It's obviously been so strange for everybody, but I think it's been a great example to people for them to reflect and kind of see what's next. And I would love to see, I want to see women leading the charge in that. And a lot of people I've spoken to have had ties with media. So we touched on this a little bit with shows before, but I always say, like, with women predominantly making consumer and travel decisions, I don't always see it reflected in like brands and like certain media. Like, again, I'll go back to shows where like 9, 10 times out of 10, it's like a male comedian or something is hosting it, which I still don't understand. So what would you like to see more of kind of in that sphere, whether it's media or brands on women? Is it more hosts? Is it more stories? Is it more like perspectives? All the above?
I think it would definitely be all of the above. I mean, I think we're seeing that in some pockets of the media where we're seeing different perspectives, but I think a lot more intersectionality when it comes to perspectives. Because a lot of the way stories are told are, predominantly from a male perspective. So much of travel writing and, travel in general is told from a male's perspective just because if you're a guy and if you're traveling on your own, you will have these crazy experiences, and that will be very vastly different from a woman traveling by herself.
100%.
And, just in terms of all of the things that you keep in mind when you're traveling by yourself as a woman is not even something that a guy thinks about, right? Like, you're always thinking about safety and is there going to be a clean washroom for you to use somewhere, and all of these tiny things that men just don't even have to think about.
Right. Well, the safety thing for sure is like the biggest. Yeah, it's a lot of other elements, and like we need to be sharing those insights with people for sure, so they can feel like they have freedom and are empowered to do it as well.
Yeah, and how that sort of reflects into depending on if you're an Indian woman or if you're an Indian American woman or if you're an Indian American woman of a certain religion, all of those things tie into the experience that you're ultimately having.
100%.
So I'd like to see more of like this intersectionality of perspective.
Well, this is like a weird question, and excuse my naivete, but my expertise on media tends to be like only in certain pockets. In India, are there a lot of like female hosts like that do like cooking shows, or I don't know if there are like popular travel shows, but things in that sphere? Like, are there women like celebrity personality types that kind of fit those pockets? Like how we have celebrity chefs that then have like book deals and then all the side stuff. I mean, I'm assuming yes,
there
because
are a lot more men for sure than women who do that. It's so funny because like the Indian mom is known for cooking and feeding and all of these things, but in a professional sphere, obviously, it's the men who dominate that field. But there are a few, and obviously with social media, all of that is changing. So
like is there a Martha Stewart equivalent?
There was. She passed some years ago. Her name is Tarla Dalal. So she was basically like a homemaker in the 70s and 80s, who started doing like cooking classes out of her home for young brides who just got married and didn't know how to cook and that kind of thing. And that got really popular. So she got like a bunch of book deals and eventually like did a bunch of shows on national television. So yeah, we kind of like grew up watching her and watching her cook. So yeah, she's definitely someone that everyone's grown up with.
So interesting. For sure. Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if this is a thing too in terms of like traditional cooking, but again, that's a very wide spectrum. So what is traditional anymore? But I always talk about this WebTube series or YouTube series. It's called Pasta Grannies. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's a woman in Italy who's like, nobody's passing down these recipes. So I'm just going to go around and start like filming all these grandmothers doing it. Because I feel like, I mean, people have been getting back into cooking, and obviously there's so much content that you can follow recipes on and things like that. And I think there was a time where people stopped learning recipes and lessons, and now they're interested again, or they're trying to make what old is new and that kind of thing. So I'm sure you're probably seeing, especially somewhere like Mumbai, sorry, I'm going off script here, but there's probably like a huge difference in places that do, again, traditional food and places that are doing like hybrid or like fusion or those kinds of things. Are you seeing that? I mean, probably a lot in Mumbai.
Yeah, there's a lot of that happening. But increasingly, I think like this fusion thing was happening maybe like 3-4 years ago, where, almost every new restaurant that opened was like this modern Indian something.
Right.
But now actually people are really interested in regional cuisine. So, which goes back to what we were talking about of how, India is like each state is a different country. So people are really interested to know like what is Kerala food actually like, and within Kerala, for example, what is the food of the Christian community and what is the food of the Hindu community or the Muslim community within that one state.
Right.
And each state has all of these different sort of compartments. So what chefs are now really interested in, and a lot of home chefs are doing this as well, is offering like a very tight distilled version of that specific type of food, that specific type of cuisine, which a lot of people are really responding to, because they were like, oh my God, I used to only eat this at home, and I never thought I'd see it in a restaurant. But now it's exciting that, a restaurant is like taking it out of like this dusty old recipe book and serving it up in a way that's cool and hip and like accessible. So there's a lot of that happening, and that's really exciting.
Again, it goes back a little bit to nostalgia, just like you said. It's something I grew up with, and I miss it. There was certainly during lockdown, I'm sure you saw it too. It was like every celebrity under the sun was turning to Instagram Live to do something, right? And I know Mindy Kaling did a whole bunch for a while where she was cooking stuff that she missed. That was her whole thing. She was like, I'm just going to do it because I'm at home writing on my projects all day, but I want to get back into cooking, and I miss this dish and this dish and this dish. Yeah, so clearly, I mean, that it's a huge aspect, and that's why I don't necessarily want to call it like street food, street fare, but like people that are really local. Sometimes it's the hole in the walls that do it best, because they're doing things more traditionally, or they're just doing one or two things like at the absolute best that you're going to get anywhere else. It's an unchanged recipe. Oh my God. See, I can't wait to get to India. There's just so many things to try. Then I've taken up so much of your time, and I really appreciate you talking to me. So I'm going to end on this final thing, which is what I always ask everybody. So let's say we're all healthy. The whole world's healthy tomorrow. So travel's not an issue anymore. And you are headed to your next dream destination, wherever that may be. What is your theme song? What is one book you're bringing, and one luxury item?
Ooh, okay. This is tough. One theme song, I really, really love Loving is Easy by Bill Withers. Bill Withers. It's just such a great, happy song, and it totally, like, in my head, it just signals like vacation and like this easygoing pace. So definitely that's what I'm going to be listening to put me in a good mood. A book, it really depends on the place. So whenever I'm traveling, I like to like read a little bit about the local place, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Whatever that can give me like some kind of perspective into the place I'm traveling to. So it would totally depend on the place. But a luxury item would be maybe no screen time.
Oh, that's a good answer. No, it's good, because usually people are always like thinking of an electronic, but that actually is really good. The opposite.
Yeah, I don't want to like.
It is a luxury.
Yeah, we've just been at home, looking at like from your laptop to your television to your phone. It's just like, every form of break is another form of a screen. And I just don't want to look at a screen anymore.
That is a really good answer. 100%. That absolutely is a luxury, because it's something that most of us don't have. Well, this whole thing has just been full of good answers, and I basically need your book to come out at some point. And I will be following all of your articles, and I don't know, I feel like you should do like a web series or something when you're in all these places with like a new dish. So you just become the Samantha Brown in India. Do your own thing. I want to see that.
Yeah, for sure. That's hopefully we'll get there soon. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.